Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer. Welcome back to F1 Manager. This is episode 47. If we are going to get into the first race of the season without having an off-season episode, we already did some of what we needed to do last episode. We've gotten to January 1st now and already done a little bit of the introduction, but I'm going to have to go fairly quickly through our preseason stuff to get into the race. We are definitely going to be bypassing practice for the most part, but of course the first race of the season you kind of want to see where the car's at. But speaking of where the car is at, our direct January 1st comparison, which of course we have plenty of time to put more upgrades on the car before the first race, or at least get the projects done and going and maybe on by second or third. But anyway, 2023 performance versus 2024 performance. Remember, we have a 30, 20, and 10% reduction in cornering and dirty air. So pretty hefty reductions. But the car, after the research, you can see has more pace, more acceleration, but dirty air cornering, just cornering low speed, that 30% reduction, it's very much a reduction. I mean, we're a good almost 10th of a G down from where we were. It's much less on the medium speed, but it is still a decrease. And then everything else is up. So, DRS is up. Dirty air cornering, same thing. Low and medium speed are taking minor and small penalties. Well, like more medium and minor penalties. And then the high speed is actually improving. One noticeable area is our brake cooling has gone up by a good, 7%, with engine cooling going up by 1%. And thanks to finishing fourth in the constructors this last year, we now have a big reduction. By the way, speaking of reduction, this is a very noteworthy thing. The penalty for exceeding the cost cap was supposed to be a 10% reduction. It's not actually a 10% reduction. It's only a 7% reduction, because if you are 10th place, you get the maximum. If you are first, you have a reduction of 30% already because you are first in the constructors, meaning you are brought down to 70% on your allocation. A further 10% reduction on the final tally brings it from 70 down to 63%. So actually, it's only a 7% reduction from the base. It's 10% on the already reduced number. So that's a very minor penalty, because you'll see this year we are still going to develop the car very well this year, even though we are now facing a, I believe, 60% reduction, or 40% reduction. We're dropping, well, no, it would be the other way around, 75% overall. I don't know. It's about a 25% reduction on what we would have had, and we're going to be just fine. A 7% reduction is nothing. That's not nothing, but it's a slap on the pinky. It's not even a slap on the wrist. I'm not going to break down details of the projects themselves. That's going to take too much time. But let me give you a quick just overview of what I'm looking at. Our car comparison January 1st, even though we're seeing that reduction, low speed, medium speed, it's a hefty reduction, and we covered off a lot of it. And at the moment, apparently, we are first on the grid in low and medium speed, and 7th in high speed. 5th in acceleration for DRS. Dirty air cornering is top 5 or first, but then we are 19th in the cooling. We are 19th in the top speed and acceleration, so we're last. And DRS is the only area that's right on the, well, it's 19th too. So we're either right at the top of the grid or right at the bottom of the grid. Now, the individual 6 components, as you break them down, we are right near the top for 3 of them, the 3 that we focused more heavily on, the wings and the underfloor. We're right near the top of the grid. Therefore, if we take the suspension, the side pods, and the chassis, early on and focus on those. One, they take less time. Two, the area where the car is very much still lagging behind in the others, we're going to make some gains. So our first upgrades are going in that direction to bring up our weak points. Brief summary of what we are doing. I have the 3 projects mentioned, and I'm getting a second round in on the chassis, though it's going to finish up right as we begin that first race weekend. So we will have to use the first iteration for the first race weekend, and then we'll have the second iteration of the chassis by the time we get to the second race weekend. And then also started doing rounds on other things. So we'll have a front wing upgrade, we'll have a rear wing upgrade as well. Now, overall, we will have 4 upgrades ready by the first race weekend. We will have the 2 additional ones following, fairly soon after. So that's a good start. But again, what I'm seeing is cornering is now, right there. We're going to have a lot of good aero, but we are still going to be lagging. We're still going to have a lot of drag. And that's something we're going to need to work heavily on throughout this season to overcome. So it's going to be a lot of chassis upgrades, a lot of side pod and suspension upgrades, which are cheaper, easier, faster to do. We focused so heavily on the other components last year. We're going to be flipping that script this season. But also, as we are still a month away from that first race and our balance is better than what it was, I'm going to go ahead and spend $18 million for our next facility upgrade, which is the design center. And, you see we're inching our way up to getting there. But now that we have that reduction in tunnel time and everything from finishing 4th last season, if we're going to continue to move up, it is going to take these facility upgrades to make that happen. But of course, our finances are supposed to be better this year. We have a lot more money rolling in race weekend by race weekend, and we'll see as the season progresses how much better that money, how that cash flow is, and what kind of upgrades it can lead to. Because last season we were still able to make a decent amount of upgrades, and right now, thanks to hanging on to Alvin for another season, we are making no changes within the driver team or staff throughout this season. So we are sticking with what we have. Therefore, there's no big overhead costs of making changes. Let's go ahead. For now, this is only the engineer capacity. It's the next level that is going to come with significantly more, and that's the one we're definitely going to want to get our hands on. Staff upgrades to Mason, now a 76 overall. Fairly well balanced. Everything's a 74 to a 78. It's not great. He is our weak staff member at the moment, but a 76 is acceptable. The new objectives laid out for the year by the team is 4th or above in the constructors. I think we can absolutely replicate that. We're aiming higher, so I think 4th is going to be quite easily doable, especially with what I've seen of car development so far. We are still lacking top speed. So going out and winning races on a consistent basis is going to be one thing, but cornering faster than everybody else means we can keep up. And then, down the straights, we're just going to have a lot of back and forth, I think, when it comes to cars can overtake us, and then we're going to get DRS and re-overtake them. The DRS is going to help us overcome our speed deficit, so on and so forth. But we do have that cornering advantage where we are quicker than everybody else in almost every respect. So it's a trade-off. I think we're going to be competing for podiums on a pretty regular basis this season. Speaking of, the long-term objective is to score podiums in 25% of this season's races. No. Target's 2026, so we actually have some time to make that happen. So it's another 3-year objective, but I think we're gonna quite possibly do that this year. Speaking of quite possibly do that this year, we did that last year. We had 7 podiums a year ago. And I think in one instance anyway, that was 2 drivers, same race. I don't know if they're going to count that one as a separate podium or not. Do we get a podium for each driver on the podium, or is it each race that we put at least one driver on the podium? In which case, either way, we still would have had 6, because I believe we only had the single race where we had that one. Was it a 1-2 finish? The one useful stat here that stands out, other than, obviously our points went up from 2022 to 2023, but contracts, we spent $24 million the first year. We spent $29 million last year, and of course most of that was the extra money that we were paying Alvin, but that's not significant. And this year, we should be seeing something similar, roughly $30 million for the contracts. Facilities development actually did go down slightly in year 2, but not by much. Only $15 million. And car development from year 1 to year 2, surprisingly, was actually really similar. We only spent $3 million more. Now this year, I expect that to go up just slightly, primarily because we're patient. We hammer out one research project or one upgrade project after another, but not rushing them is the key. I did rush one of these preseason projects to get it done in the window to have it ready for the first race, but outside of that, I don't push that envelope. Just steady progress, move up the grid. We're not fighting for wins right now and fighting for a championship and have to win kind of situation. We're not playing around with fire. We're playing around, playing the long game, and we're seeing it go very much in our favor already. Bahrain is a very balanced track that requires a bit of everything. It's one of the reasons why it's a good first race of the season. Last year, we only managed 14th and 15th, but I want to say we had some issues in that race, and it wasn't just a matter of, here's where our pace is, but at the same time, beginning of the season, it kind of was. Remember, our initial goals, our initial targets were 7th. We just got faster and faster and faster as the season went on. Now, those goals of 4th this year, really it comes down to top 8s in terms of the sponsor objectives and everything like that. This year, that threshold is much higher than a year ago, and it's not just a matter of getting out of Q1. Now it's get Q3. Now it's qualify top 8. Now it's finish top 10, finish top 8, kind of across the board. So it's all essentially top 8 is going to be the target every single race weekend. So we want to consistently be in the points and hopefully competing for podiums more often than not. Now, we have the cornering capability of this car, but that DRS, how much does it hold us back? How often? And that's a big thing, because outside of Monaco and maybe a go-kart track in say Hungary, that everywhere you're going to need that straight line speed that we do not have. Now the acceleration part, well, we don't have that in great quantities either. What I do have is the 4 upgrades ready for the first race, as we're about to start that first race weekend. And here's how the car is now looking following that. Of course, the other teams have been developing as well. I've seen the numbers move. I've seen that threshold go a different direction. Now, our top speed compared to the grid average is still below, but it's not far. It's less than 0.2 of a kilometer per hour behind everybody else now. Acceleration is still behind, but it's 0.003 Gs behind grid average. Low speed, better than grid average. Medium speed, better than grid average. And high speed, better than grid average. DRS, again, in that same boat of it's a little behind, but it's not as far behind, so that's still a stronger area for us. DRS is still better than driving alone, as we made progress here first, and we're actually acceleration-wise now just above grid average in the DRS. But dirty air cornering is better in all aspects compared to others, so we can follow cars. So that's a big combination, right? We can gain with DRS, and we can follow cars closely. Brake cooling, engine cooling, still behind the grid average. In fact, we're over 10% behind in the engine cooling, but it'll get there when it gets there. perennial slow car Aston Martin is nowhere near us. In fact, we're actually matching them for DRS. We have finally gotten there, and you can see top speed-wise just how close we are now to the back marker. Haas 2 is looking like no match for us. Yes, they have a slight speed advantage, but we make up for it in so many other areas that we should easily be away from those two teams. AlphaTauri was the other back marker a year ago, and they look like they've got a still decently competitive car. For one, the speed advantage more so for them than the others, and they actually have better high-speed cornering than what we have, so they are well up the grid. But we are clear in the other departments, especially low-speed cornering. We have a hefty advantage over AlphaTauri there. Also the dirty air, though, again, marginally. Our high speed is just barely ahead of them, so I wouldn't be surprised if AlphaTauri is fighting a bit higher up the grid this year. McLaren was one of those part-time back markers a year ago, and we've actually passed them for speed here right before. So I actually expect that McLaren is going to be very much near the back of the grid. The two teams we ended up fighting with at the end of the season, Alfa Romeo and then Alpine. Alfa Romeo still have a good speed advantage over us, but we are better at cornering, especially. Wow, high speed, we have a big advantage. Actually, we have a healthy advantage in all cornering aspects, and dirty air cornering a fair bit ahead. So I think Alfa Romeo, their days fighting the top three seem to be done. Same can be said of Alpine. In fact, I think I switch these two, Alfa Romeo versus Alpine, the Alpine is ahead in every single department, but when you look closely, the numbers are similar except for high-speed cornering. But they are very, very tight across the board. But if Alpine's better at everything, that late season charge that they made to overtake them seems obvious. Ferrari finished last season third, but kind of fourth best as we were outscoring them pretty consistently. They were falling off a little bit. Is that the case here? We saw it in real life too, as they really fell off at the end of this season. So they've got a healthy speed advantage compared to us. But cornering is now pretty similar, pretty balanced. I think medium and high speed kind of offset each other. Low speed goes in our favor to where we're a little bit better at cornering, but then they have that little bit better pace. We do not have clear advantages in every area. I think we are similar now to Ferrari. Still maybe just a hair behind, especially that top speed. That's not a small disadvantage. That's a pretty big one. We are actually better at cornering in every single department compared to the Mercedes, and our speed is only just behind Mercedes. So it actually looks like Mercedes has not kept up this year, and I have a feeling that we're looking at Mercedes only being about fourth best. And finally, the Red Bull, and this really goes to show just how much progress we've made as we have taken over. Low-speed cornering was a weakness for us at the start of last season, and we brought it along as the season went on, but it never was a top thing. I mean, we were kind of midfield, but that research that we did with a substantial, not substantial, but a moderate regulation change regarding low and medium speed, especially the low speed, has seen us flip our position big time. We really covered it off better than I thought. When I was looking at the first set of results going, gosh, I'm seeing us fall down the grid. Well, compared to everybody else, we've gone from 10th to 1st. So yes, we fell down, but that 30% reduction has cost everybody else much more than it cost us. Here's the thing about Red Bull, though. That's not just a decent speed advantage like the Red Bull. That's a huge speed advantage. So keeping up with the Red Bull and Ferrari is going to be really tough. Cornering with them, I mean, it looks like we can keep up decently well, though. So we're now, getting competitive with those cars. Last season, it was tactical, where we were able to be competitive. The car itself is showing signs that it can be competitive. I think we're still behind Red Bull. I think we're probably still behind Ferrari. It looks like we're actually ahead of Mercedes, so I'm guessing we're about third best. And then Alpine seems to be a very clear fifth on the grid. AlphaTauri is probably sixth right now, with Alfa Romeo all the way down in seventh, I would guess. But let's go ahead and get into our first race weekend of the year.
Welcome to the archipelago of Formula One. Bahrain might have a small land footprint, but it's showing its big spirit right now in the grandstands. Either way, it's time for another fantastic weekend of Grand Prix racing. The Bahrain International Circuit is a challenging track, and the cars routinely have to brake from high gear to low to take the narrow turns. With the need for downhill braking, the risk of locking up is one drivers will need to manage. It's all about focus and balance to get victory here. At this early stage in the season, there are still plenty of opportunities for things to change. In this sport, there simply are no guarantees. Okay then, let's get to it.
First, the good news. We had really long runs, and yet our times still weren't that far off, so I do think we're going to be ultimately fast. But also, we had some really long runs. So track acclimatization got fairly high for both, though Porsche did not get to 100%, but Albon is in the 80s, and that is because we found his setup early. It was FP2 when we had Albon at 97%. I just kept it there and just let him run and run and run and run for two reasons. One, the track acclimatization for him was a big bonus. Two, we were at 0% part confidence, so getting those really long, heavy fuel runs on the soft compound this time around led to, what we ultimately got, which is we still have a ways to go on that part acclimatization, but we really got a ton of practice in these three practice. We got a ton of progress in these three practice sessions. Now, Porsche didn't find the setup as easy. Actually, I only ended up getting to 95%, which is also part of the reason why he's only in the low 90s on the track acclimatization, as he was, struggling back and forth with the setup throughout. But I mean, you can see we ran over 70 laps as a pair in FP3. Here are those results. So we got 95 and 85, and then we got 85 on the car part knowledge from 0 in 3 practice sessions. By the end of this first race, we're going to have that already at 100%. That's crazy. And then 95, 97. So we're getting 14 on the bonuses for each driver, which is great. That means reactions -1 for Albon and -1 for Porsche for what it could have been. But still pretty good outcomes on that one. And I think we should have ourselves a competitive race car for this one. Let's see if that's actually the case. I have enough confidence in the car that we are no longer going to do FP1 banker laps, and I'm not going to worry as much about getting out last in FP1. I think getting middle towards back end is going to be just fine. I think we should easily get out of FP1. Let's hope that is the case. Let's hope that we actually do have that proper pace. Again, we don't have that straight line speed, so it's it's not an automatic given. But in qualifying, you do get DRS open, and that certainly helps with that pace. So this, for us, is now the equivalent of our previous banker lap. 1 run in FP1, that saves that compound to be your starting compound in FP2, and that ultimately saves us 1 set of tires for use in Q3, for potential use in the race. We'll see how that one pans out. But of course, right now, P19, P20, it's going to take our lap to make things happen. So what does Porsche do? 6th. 3 milliseconds off of Hamilton in 5th. As for Albon, I think he should be putting in a pretty decent lap as well. Across the line now. And 1 millisecond behind Porsche in P8. So there you go. There's your Red Bulls, Ferraris at the top like I expected. And then Ricciardo and Hamilton, these 4 cars are within 4 milliseconds. can't be closer. Can't be much closer anyway. Coming up on the end of Q2, and we're going to have to get out there and get going. We did not get a clean run for Albin as he was blocked by traffic. Pourchaire did have traffic as well. I don't know if it impacted his time or not. But you can see the top 4 are quite clear. And then here's that same thing where we have a bunch of cars right there with almost identical times. This time it's Hamilton 3 milliseconds behind, with Pourchaire 1 behind Ocon. I think he ended up getting a clean enough run, but Albin's very much was not. Albin was blocked on his lap, so we'll see how we do as we now go live on the lap. Ocon out there first, meaning his time might not be quite as good. That's definitely a good thing for us. Hamilton is in the middle. Those are the 2 guys we're watching out for and competing with. But as we come around, Pourchaire still not even a guarantee for Q3, and Albin at the moment P15 as we come around, but clearly the track is ramping up and times are getting better. Let's hope that our times are getting better as well, as Pourchaire already down onto the bubble. Pourchaire back up to P8, Albin up to P6. Ultimately Pourchaire P9, so we will see Q3 here. Yeah, that's awfully close. Bottas and McLaren way up there in P7. So far through elimination, Lance Stroll will start from last place. Pierre Gasly somehow already a penalty. Not sure how you get a penalty in the first race. You're already taking your extra allotted engine in the first race, but okay. They just know they're off the pace, so they're going to want extra engines, apparently. Well, anyway, Lando Norris, the McLaren, one up, one down. That's not good for them. Alfa Romeo a little bit down. Russell in the Mercedes is out. One of the Alpines is out. Like I said, Mercedes is definitely off the pace. And as noted, AlphaTauri is up the grid a bit, though Vettel was way down here in 17th. So is Guan Yu Zhou going to be able to replicate that? I mean, he was just off the back of our really, really close-knit group in Q1, and then Q2 he was slightly faster. And we ride with Albin as he gets his final lap started. Now we've gone with the alternate strategy compared to everybody else. Everybody else used the fresh tires to start Q3 to get their quicker run in. We used the used set from Q2, and as a result, we're P9 and P10 right now. So that first run definitely was not quick enough, but we now have the fresh set where everybody else is on the used. So we're going to be one of the only ones moving up the order right now. How much further up the order we are, we'll find out in one more turn, as the checkered flag is now waving. You can see a lot of the guys are not improving their times at this stage. Final corner. And we'll see what it amounts to. Pourchaire P6. Albin P7, so we cannot beat Guan Yu Zhou and the AlphaTauri. I did mention that they looked pretty fast. Surprised about Bottas and the McLaren being this high up, but we do manage to beat. Both Mercedes are behind us on the grid. Both Alpines are behind us on the grid. Alfa Romeo is nowhere to be seen near the front of the grid. The one surprise for me really is the single McLaren of Bottas being this competitive with that car. But P6, P7 is a good starting grid spot. That's on merit. We are there on merit. We corner better than everybody else, but we just don't have that straight line speed. So what is that compromise? What does that come out to when you combine that package and put that puzzle together? Here, anyway, on a very balanced track, that puts us P6, P7.
It's time for the final touches here on the grid, ahead of today's race.
Qualifying went well for Williams, as attested by their strong position on the grid. Now it's all about finding that edge for the race itself. Mercedes ran into a number of issues during qualifying, and they won't be starting the race where they'd want to be. But anything can happen, and they're surely ready to take any opportunity that comes their way. We've been having sunny weather here today, but there are some clouds looming that might complicate things for teams further down the line.
But which team has perfected the strategy that will see them prevail today, here at the Bahrain Grand Prix? The drivers are lined up tonight under mostly clear skies. Here's Williams. They're in the front half of the pack, so there's plenty of potential for them. And then we've got Alex Albon. A top 10 position today, but will they be able to capitalize on it? The teams are ready to go. Here we go with the Bahrain Grand Prix. And it's lights out, and away we go.
Porsche now has a similar race pace to Albon. There's just some other areas where they sit apart from one another. But what we're going to do for this race, first off, we're already probably, I'm estimating that we're probably already at the end of the episode and we're just starting the race. Therefore, I am going to have to go really fast. I am going to have to throw some of my tactical compactness where we're really breaking down the detail and, just speed through things a lot more than we normally would. Also, I am taking a strategy that is a little more aggressive in terms of what tires we're going to be using in this two-stopper versus ultimately what we could do. I'm counting on the fact that these guys can probably stretch, and therefore we're going to settle in very early, and we're also going a little bit light by a lap, and so we're already P6, P7, and already going to start to back off for now and wait until we get into a later phase. Oops, Porsche. I let Porsche go on just a hair longer with the ERS, and he pushes past Albon. I think Porsche is going to have a similar pace. Let's go ahead and speed things up as we are already settled into that position. I have a feeling we will have no issues following guys, as DRS is a bonus, and we're faster in the corners. So Verstappen in the early lead. It is the two cars that, from what I saw, look like they should have a clear advantage, and they do, but it's not like they're way ahead of the pace of everybody else. They're just ahead. As Guan Yu Zhou makes a mistake, and that bumps us up to P5, P6. He was the guy in between us and those front cars. Now, will we have enough pace, though, at this point to be within DRS of Sainz? As, Zhou was between us, and DRS gets enabled, and one of only two places where there is no DRS is right in front of us. I have a feeling we may not get it, but we've got a lap here of good cornering and maybe try to close that up. Porsche is the one who's got to try to do so. Let's go ahead and use his overtake. Let's drive a little more aggressively. Actually, I think I'd rather do it here than on the tires, as the tires, you can see we're pushing right towards the limits with a soft, medium, soft strategy for this one. So the limitations is it's going to really fall off the last few laps of each stint. So that's 3 times where we can expect to fall off in the final 2 to 3 laps. And Porsche does close that gap, so he's got that interval down. Let's go ahead and back off, go neutral. Meanwhile, Albon is now the one who is going to have the same issue
very good.
of trying to close that down. It was well over a second, but Bottas apparently, before we pushed that out to 1.4, apparently he was still at 0.9. Gaps opening from 13th on down. Vettel, Norris, the Haas cars, the Aston Martins, Schumacher, and Guan Yu Zhou, of course, who made his mistake and is behind everybody. Albon has passed Porsche, so we can go back to backing off with him. He's done what he needed to do to get back up there. But Bottas is 3 seconds behind. So we have turned it into a front 6 or front 3 teams pulling away from the field, and that could be ideal for us going forward, as now Albon has taken the fastest lap forward from Porsche, but again, we have done what we needed to do to open the gap behind us. That is ideal. I don't care if we go forward at all. I just want to run away with these guys and let everyone on the soft compound. So it looks like we have a very popular strategy here. Actually, I think all of the strategies were soft, and then it was either soft, hard, soft, soft, medium, soft, or soft, hard, medium, something along those lines. So the soft, medium, soft is the one where you're really going to stretch the tires to the limit. We are going to go later into this cycle than anybody else, but you can see tire wear wise, Lap 18 when we are expecting to make that first stop, and it's already lap 14 as we push on. No one has stopped yet. The field is not that spread out. It's only gone out to 5.5 to the following group. A gap's a gap though, and that's good. We're coming up pretty quick onto that window, and we're going to see cars starting to fall off the pace, and those ahead of us are already in the low 30s. So we're seeing Leclerc go to the front because he's at 37%. So we actually could make our way forward a little bit, but prolonging the life of the tires is better than those around us. That went off as the first Red Bull peels off into the pits. It's Perez here on lap 16. A little early for that one, and the first McLaren, the first Mercedes, the first AlphaTauri all into the pits. And you see just how far down Perez is coming back out. The field is still fairly bunched up. Five additional cars. A lot of the midfield has peeled off, which means positionally we are going to have some clean air, you would think, by the time we come back out. What are everyone opting for? Most everyone is going to the hard compound. Verstappen, the only one who thinks he's going to make that soft, medium, soft happen, and he pit a couple laps earlier than us, so stretching to make that happen is going to be a challenge, but that's going to give us better pace than those on the hard compound. And Albin goes into the race lead, by the way. And Porsche back out on track, down in P7 now. So behind the two Ferraris, behind the two Red Bulls. Is he still within range? 1.3 behind Leclerc, so he is going to have to push on a little bit here to get back up there. Use that overtake, get back within that DRS range. So we were a little bit slower on that pit stop. Albin, meanwhile, needs to be attacking for the remainder of his lap here. And Porsche is going to have to back off as soon as we get back within DRS range. Two Red Bulls are a ways ahead, though. Pitting earlier, the undercut has been a little bit faster. Ocon into the pits as well as Albin. Albin back out 2.777, a little bit slow to start this season here, and he comes back out in P6. Both of the Ferraris also going soft, medium, soft. Ricciardo is going to go soft, medium, soft. Ocon, Zhou, Stroll all going soft, medium, soft. Perez, the only front runner on the soft, hard, soft strategy. Porsche up to P3 without pushing. Okay. So we are faster than the Ferrari, are we? 4.5 seconds behind Verstappen and Perez, though, so that's worrying that those two got a bit of ways. 7-second gap from the second train here. Multiple cars have crashed in Sector 3. A McLaren and Alpine, those were the cars behind us. Local yellow, the gap behind has gotten even bigger. We're now looking at 11 seconds to Bottas. Ricciardo in the pits and carrying the penalty. Ricciardo was the one who hit him in the Alpine. So it was Ricciardo and Bottas. Both in new cars this year. 2 seconds now for Albin. .7 behind now, and Albin still at 2 seconds. The DRS making it hard to come back, but Porsche is leading the train, and Albin is pushing harder, so ultimately he should get back up there. So Albin in no man's land is probably going to lose a bit of pace here. Like I said, that DRS is still a very important thing for us, and Porsche has it. Albin couldn't quite get in that range. Anything more than about half a second, we will conserving, and we make a pass. "17 seconds to Ocon, so we are really, really pulling away from that group. Folks, I think we might be a top 3 team now. We're the third of those top 3. We're definitely weaker than the other 2. But even with conserve, we have enough pace with DRS to overtake these guys. As it keeps happening, Pourchaire and Albon both just passed Sainz and Leclerc. Meanwhile, we are helping extend the life of these tires as we only pushed essentially on the outlap and nowhere else. And that gap behind is slowly going out further. It's 18.9, so nearly 19 seconds now. Not enough yet to get clear, but everybody's on a 2-stopper. There is no 1-stopper today, so I don't have to worry about that one, even though it's on the hard compound.
Was that a lock-up on the track?
Over the course of a handful of laps, as I sped things up, Sainz ended up driving away from Pourchaire a little bit on one of those overtakes and probably tucking in. It allowed Leclerc and Albon, Leclerc's pace, he quickly caught up to Pourchaire. So now actually it's all 3 guys together, which means as we go to enter our pit window, the double stack is out.
And a new position, just gained by Williams.
We're now just 2.5 seconds behind Sainz. So hopefully with Leclerc sometimes leading this thing, we should be able to come back, hopefully fairly quickly at them. But we are slowly getting the fuel back to where it needs to be. So the latest round of pit stops is beginning. I've just about got the fuel right. 0.3 kilograms, 0.4 kilograms under where we need to be, but we're almost there. And we've nearly caught up to Sainz, just a 1.5 seconds back. And it's 22.2 as Verstappen and Sainz both pit. Verstappen and Sainz both pitting. We're at 39% here. We know what happens on the softs. I want to extend by at least 1 lap for both.
Keep the head down.
And while we still have Leclerc ahead of us, and that makes perfect sense to extend by 1 more lap. But that does mean that 1 is possibly going to have to extend a little bit further. But at 39%, we have a little bit of life left, and six seconds behind Perez, who still has not pit. He is going the hard soft though, so he gets that lap or 2 extra. So he might pit this lap or the next lap, you would think. But we're closing up on him actually fairly decently right now, as he is definitely off the pace. Full attack from Albon on his in-lap. No overtake to use though, as he does not have the ERS. Let's go ahead and check in on Pourchaire. Perez does pit, so Perez on the hard pits now. That's what we've extended to match those on the hard. And Albon even a lap later.
Let's close this gap.
2.849, not a very good stop on that one. And that is going to bring us back behind those guys, but we'll have some fresher tires at the end that can hopefully make a pass. We don't want to be going too hard here. That overtake is still on, as we need to try to catch up to those guys. Pourchaire is 2.5 seconds behind. Albon, meanwhile, is giving it everything he can here. Use the little bit of overtake we have on this next straight, at least.
Vettel has just pitted.
Okay, back to neutral. Verstappen just 10 seconds behind, so we're definitely not going to be racing him at the end of this.
Okay, back off.
Boy, how far behind is Albon going to be? How slow has this lap been for him? Going solo. No DRS. Pourchaire 2.4 behind. Perez all the way down to P4, so pitting later has not worked out in his favor. Sainz is just 4 seconds behind Verstappen. Perez is 3 seconds back. Leclerc is in his DRS range.
Either is already gone. I have no regret anymore.
I already told you to pit.
Nathan. Is everything okay?
Hit. Wow, okay. Folks, that's on me, I think.
Boxes lap.
I said
Yes, okay, box.
in my head, I had told him to pit. He had not done so. He's going to lose some ground here. Yeah, he's lost 2 seconds to Verstappen already. In Albon's case, well, for one thing, he's not going to have the benefit of DRS. Pourchaire is not closing up on those guys ahead of him either, as Albon finally into the pits. A lap later than intended. 2 laps later than everybody else.
DRS.
Pourchaire not getting up into range on those guys either, so we're gonna have to back off and let those tires last. Albon's only advantage is that he's got fresher tires at the end of this thing, and we're gonna have to go standard straight from the off. 12 laps to go. We gotta go conserve for a little bit here. 7 seconds behind for Albon. So yes, right now we are looking at P5, P6. Here was the thing about this one, and we've seen this so many times with a, like say, Mercedes this year or the later part of this season in real life. They have to push harder to keep up with front runners. And ultimately, when you get to the final stint, we've seen, Red Bull, we've seen Ferrari beat them on a pretty regular basis here late in the season in the final stint, and see Mercedes fall off. And that's ultimately because, they have the engine turned up. They have to turn it down to make sure they have enough fuel. They have to extend tire life because they pushed harder earlier in the race just to be there, to be in the conversation. But then that conversation late in the race, I think I need to be pitting at the same time as these guys, ultimately, and that has not been, our friend. Just 7 seconds behind for Albon, and he's definitely much fresher tires. Speaking of, where are we at on that? Pourchaire is right with those guys. Albon does have an advantage in the final laps, but he's so far behind, I think, that it's not going to make much of a difference. Now, at least we are comfortable compared to everybody else. We're not going to get a fastest lap as a result out of this, but we could in one of these later laps maybe get a big push with Albon, try to get it. So in his case, let's harvest and let's conserve. So Albon, we are now thinking about fastest lap. Big gap behind, plenty of time to last. Let's not go light here. Now, Pourchaire did ultimately pit at the same time as, who was it? Sainz? But came out 2.5 seconds back out of the pit stop. So we do have that weaker pit crew. We went in less than a second behind. We came out. Actually, no, we went in about 2 seconds behind. We came out 2.5 seconds behind. Remember, Pourchaire had lost Sainz, and then it was Leclerc who was pulling us back up to him. Leclerc was 1.5 seconds down. Pourchaire was 0.5 seconds behind him, and then peeled in. Alright, that's enough fuel. Go neutral from here. Gap behind is fine at 13 seconds. Pourchaire slowly falling off the back of those guys. But just as predicted, it's your Red Bull's the fastest. It's the Ferraris just behind, though they are getting ahead of Perez here. That's your DRS advantage at least. And Perez pitting a bit later. He lost some ground on the hard compound in the last couple of laps. It was worse than the medium compound on the last couple of laps. So that's a strategy mistake. But otherwise, Red Bull is clearly fastest on this be-all, slow, medium, fast corners, plenty of long straights. And this track has it all. But here we are, third, and pulling away from take this view as he makes his attempt at the fastest lap of the race. Let's go ahead and check in with how that's looking. From 44% tire wear, it may not be possible. It may not be possible, so we'll see what he can do. Sector 1 was yellow. Ooh, we are coming up on Pourchaire really fast here with this push. Porsche now 10 seconds behind. That's to show you how much these tires fall off. And for us, yeah, we're getting green, but it's not purple. We're getting a good lap time by just attacking like crazy, and may actually end up overtaking Porsche, if anybody. And Porsche, use your overtake to try to get to the end, but he's got nothing left.
Use overtake, use overtake.
Try to get out of the way if you can, please. I'm not trying to give Albin P5. That was not the intention. There was a huge gap. It is green, Sector 2. As Verstappen is going to claim the victory. Perez, Leclerc, Sainz. So it is in that order. Porsche comes around the final corner. Still in P5. And here is Albin coming up quickly behind. And actually, that is Porsche ahead of us. So Ricardo got out of the way and let us go by. We got the blue flag on him. So we end up double stack. It was all kind of double stack. It was close with those front four, and we weren't that far behind him. And look, I mean, Alonso still has not crossed the line. Alonso just now. Ocon, Hamilton, Gasly.
That's the flag.
Looks like he is going to hang on and get points for Aston Martin.
Thank you, everyone.
Interesting on that final result.
Nice job.
But
Nice job.
it is so good to see that we are clear of the midfield and now going to compete with those top 3 teams. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this episode. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there. Bye for now.